You already know how I feel, so we don't even need to get into that right now, because my guest, the person I've been aching to talk to, is a two-time Super Bowl winning defensive tackle, formerly with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Indianapolis Colts. He now serves as a college football and NFL analyst for the Monday Night Countdown pregame show. He's my buddy. He's a contributor to my day job, First Take. He's a contributor to all things ESPN. He's my brother, the one and only Booger McFarland. What's up, Big Tom? How are you, man?
Stephen, hey, what's going on, buddy? How we doing?
I mean, first of all, it's nice to see a smile on your face. Let's get that out the way, because when I saw you after the selection committee decided not to put Florida State in the top 4, I mean, I'm not going to say you were about to cry, but I will say you were utterly disgusted. I said, my Lord, he's really passionate about this. Explain yourself, Booger McFarland. What's the problem, my man? What's the problem?
Well, the reason you saw that face from me, Stephen, is because I thought it was a travesty to the sport that I cover and the sport that we all love, which is college football, because you had 13 people in the room who decided that they know football better than the actual game of football itself, because they said this, and let's get to the crux of the issue. We can talk about best, most deserving, all those different things. But here's what they did. They decided that based on an injury to a quarterback, and I get it, quarterback is the most important position on the field, no doubt. I hear you, no problem. Let's move on. But they decided because a team didn't have a star quarterback, that team couldn't win games. And that's utterly wrong. That team already won 2 games without the starting quarterback. They beat Florida and they beat Louisville. How did they do it? They had a dominating defense, a defense that dominated up and down the field. So it's not about can they win, because they've already won. They're 13-0. It's about how we want them to win. And we're going to project forward and say that we don't like ugly wins, and we don't know if they can compete or if they can score points to the level that we want them to, because selfishly, the 13 people in the room and some people around the country, kind of like yourself, we want to be entertained. We want to see a good game on January 1. We don't want to see a blowout like we saw with TCU. And I think that's utterly wrong, because you don't know how the game is going to play out. I remind you, Oregon was a 10.
You already know how I feel, so we don't even need to get into that right now, because my guest, the person I've been aching to talk to, is a two-time Super Bowl winning defensive tackle, formerly with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Indianapolis Colts. He now serves as a college football and NFL analyst for the Monday Night Countdown pregame show. He's my buddy. He's a contributor to my day job, First Take. He's a contributor to all things ESPN. He's my brother, the one and only Booger McFarland. What's up, Big Tom? How are you, man?
Stephen, hey, what's going on, buddy? How we doing?
I mean, first of all, it's nice to see a smile on your face. Let's get that out the way, because when I saw you after the selection committee decided not to put Florida State in the top 4, I mean, I'm not going to say you were about to cry, but I will say you were utterly disgusted. I said, my Lord, he's really passionate about this. Explain yourself, Booger McFarland. What's the problem, my man? What's the problem?
Well, the reason you saw that face from me, Stephen, is because I thought it was a travesty to the sport that I cover and the sport that we all love, which is college football, because you had 13 people in the room who decided that they know football better than the actual game of football itself, because they said this, and let's get to the crux of the issue. We can talk about best, most deserving, all those different things. But here's what they did. They decided that based on an injury to a quarterback, and I get it, quarterback is the most important position on the field, no doubt. I hear you, no problem. Let's move on. But they decided because a team didn't have a star quarterback, that team couldn't win games. And that's utterly wrong. That team already won 2 games without the starting quarterback. They beat Florida and they beat Louisville. How did they do it? They had a dominating defense, a defense that dominated up and down the field. So it's not about can they win, because they've already won. They're 13-0. It's about how we want them to win. And we're going to project forward and say that we don't like ugly wins, and we don't know if they can compete or if they can score points to the level that we want them to, because selfishly, the 13 people in the room and some people around the country, kind of like yourself, we want to be entertained. We want to see a good game on January 1. We don't want to see a blowout like we saw with TCU. And I think that's utterly wrong, because you don't know how the game is going to play out. I remind you, Oregon was a 10-point favorite on Friday night over Washington, and Washington won. Tulane was a favorite over SMU, and SMU won. The game of football is not played in a boardroom with 13 mics and TVs and a lot of people that make a lot of money. The game of football is played on grass, and it's a bone-on-bone game. And to me, that's why I was shocked, because I've been on that field. I've been the underdog and told what I could not do. And at the end of the day, I've done it before. And I just thought those kids were wrong. And then on top of that, to read the tweet from Jordan Travis that said this, and I almost cried with this, Stephen A. He said, "I wish I would have broke my leg sooner so my team could have proven they could have won without me." And that's utterly wrong, man. And so that's why you saw that face from me.
See, this is the thing. I understand the emotion. I understand the feeling in terms of being disappointed. Where you threw me aback was looking surprised. This is the NCAA we're talking about. That's number one. Let's get that out the way. I mean, to act like you're shocked. I mean, my God, there are a plethora of instances throughout college football history where people got holes. Now, granted, none of them were undefeated like Florida State. I'll give you that. But you're talking about Baylor. You're talking about TCU. Once upon a time, I just got some notes here. 2014 TCU and Baylor, 2018 Ohio State, 2017 Central Florida. This is not the first time, you know, folks have gotten holes when it comes to the college football playoff picture. You and I both know that. And so, to me, for you to look at it when Alabama had the fifth, in terms of strength of schedule, they were ranked fifth. Florida State was ranked 55th. Then you take into account TCU getting blown out 65-7 in the national championship game. The one thing I know about Booger McFarland is Booger McFarland knows something about ratings. He knows something about money, and he knows that the opportunity to have ratings facilitates you getting more money. And if you're college football, everything has always been about the money. So what the hell are you surprised about?
Well, you're right that the networks are concerned about money, the networks are concerned about ratings. If that's the case, then put that in the bylaws. The bylaws say we want the 4 best teams. The bylaws don't say we want the 4 best teams that can give us ratings while we sit around and eat black-eyed peas and turnip greens and cornbread on New Year's Day. That's not what the bylaws say. The bylaws simply say this: the 4 best teams based on a certain criteria. So, yeah, I'm not surprised at what the NCAA does. We know it's a bunch of good old boys up in Kansas City or wherever they are making rules and trying to do different things. But this college football playoff committee is supposed to be different, and they've operated differently over the last 9 years. But this year, in the 10th year, all of a sudden they want to do something differently based on what we saw, or I don't know if I want to call it recency bias, but just what we saw on the field. Because they saw Alabama dominate the 2-time reigning defending national champion, as I've heard. Who were
29-0, by the way, who were 29-0 over 2.5 years. They hadn't lost a game.
I get it. But the last 2.5 years has no bearing on this conversation. I get it. It sounds good to say, but that has no bearing on what happened this year in 2023 in the football season. But I do understand there are humans in the room that can't forget about what you're talking about, which is them being champions. And so I just wish they would come out and say, you know what, guys, Florida State, you deserve it. We don't think that you guys can put on a good enough show against Michigan or whoever, and so we're going to keep you out. And I think that's the crux of the issue, because Florida State, 13-0, the winner of a Power 5 conference, that type of resume has never been left out. But all of a sudden this year, you want to leave it out, and then you're going to blame it on an injury. You don't know how the team or the game is going to play out. We know none of that. Well, and so I think that's the biggest issue for me.
Well, Booger, who do you believe should have been left out? We've got Michigan, we've got Washington, we've got Alabama, we've got Texas. Texas and Alabama 3 and 4, of course. Who do you think should have been left out?
Alabama. I think Alabama should have been left out.
Alabama should have been left out?
Absolutely. No question. No question.
The SEC champion, the #1 conference in football, who won 11 straight, who knocked off the reigning defending 2-time national champions. Yeah. They should have been left out?
They should have been left out, and I'm going to explain why, because I know you can follow me, and you are a student of the game and a student of sports. See, here's what college football is about until next year when it goes to a 12-team playoff. Every game matters in college football. And there's this team called Texas that went to Tuscaloosa this season, not last season, not 2 seasons ago. They went this season, and they beat Alabama, the mighty Alabama. Well, guess what? That team also went 12-1 and won a conference championship. And so, therefore, because of that win, for me, I had Florida State in at number 3. It was going to be Michigan 1, Washington 2, Florida State 3. And the decision for me was going to come down to between Texas and Alabama. And by way of that win in Tuscaloosa in September, I'm giving a nod to Texas as being the better team. Why? I saw Texas go into Tuscaloosa and beat you by 10 points. So even if Alabama beat Georgia, which they did, I'm still not going to put them in. I already thought about this before the game even played out. That way, I wouldn't have a visceral, emotional reaction.
Well, why haven't you brought up Michigan? I mean, Alabama wasn't associated with a cheating scandal. Michigan was. How come it can't be Michigan that you're looking on that should be on the outside as opposed to Alabama or Texas or Washington?
Here's what you said. and it's a key word, and I love you because your thesaurus is deeper than most people in America. You said associated.
Right.
You didn't say they did it.
That's
you just
true.
said they associated.
That's
associated, alleged.
We don't know if they did it or not.
Did they cheat or did they not? We don't know it, so I'm not going to punish a team for something I don't know that they did. And so therefore, that's the reason why I'm not touching Michigan. Now, you show me proof or they are sentenced based on that cheating scandal, I'll pull them out. As a matter of fact, the College Football Playoff Committee said as long as Michigan is eligible to be ranked, we're going to rank them. If they become ineligible, then we won't rank them. So I'm going to follow the same bylaws as the College Football Playoff Selection Committee did.
What about the argument that, look at 2014, where J.T. Barrett goes down for Ohio State, Cardell Jones comes up in there, they stomp Wisconsin 59-0, they get into the postseason, and obviously they win the national championship, okay? Now, Florida State could have done that, but they struggled against Florida, which is a mediocre team, and they struggled against Louisville, which is a good team, not a great team. How about that argument?
What the struggle? Yes. Won? Yes. They won both of those games. And did we not see your mighty Alabama have to have a prayer against Auburn, the last-second play of the game?
That was a great play, though. That was a great play, though. It wasn't like just some Hail Murray. That was a great play. Isaiah Bond catching that pass in the right corner of the end zone.
It's 4th and 31, Stephen. That's a prayer.
It didn't look like a throw. It didn't look like a prayer to me to watching Jalen Milroe throw that ball to Isaiah Bond. That looked like a bit better than a prayer. Well, let me ask you this, though. Kirk Herbstreit, our colleague at ESPN.
Yeah.
He kept bringing up the fact that obviously head-to-head competition matters, record matters, strength of schedule matters. We all get that. But he also brought up the nugget that in those bylaws, they do highlight how player and coaches' availability matters in terms of the whole selection process. So losing Jordan Travis obviously compromised Florida State to some degree because it affected quote-unquote style points. That obviously is something they said beforehand could potentially play a factor. It's not something that they came out of the wind with. I mean, they said it beforehand. They let you know this is some of the things that were going to play a part in the criteria. How about that argument?
Well, I think that's a really good argument, but here's what I'll say. You talk about the absence of coaches and players. Michigan played 6 games without Jim Harbaugh this year, and they won. They proved they could win without Jim Harbaugh.
Okay.
Florida State played 2 games without their quarterback, and they won. They proved they could win those 2 without their starting quarterback, Jordan Travis. But the reason we don't count those wins of Florida State, they didn't look good enough. It wasn't stylish enough. See, Stephen A., you and I can both put on suits. One might be Tom Ford, one might be from Sears or J.C. Penney.
No,
they're going to look different, okay? They're going to look different. Same, might be suits and ties, but they're going to look different. And we are a society where we want certain things to look a certain way. It doesn't matter if both of us got on suits. We can both have on nice suits. But just because yours says Tom Ford and mine might say Sears, the look is differently, and people are going to gravitate toward you. Same thing with football. We want the offense to look good. We want the quarterback to shine.
We want entertainment.
Okay, exactly. Well, just say that then.
But didn't they say that? Is that not what they're saying, Booger, when they say, excuse me, if players ain't available, that might factor into our decision-making when it comes to the selection process? Is that not exactly what they say? They got to spell it out for you. You know that's what they're saying.
I thought you've been covering sports all your life.
I have.
Basketball, football, you even love the Yankees and baseball.
Yes.
There's a winner and there's a loser.
That's
There's
true.
a reason we love sports. That's what sports has always been about. Sports that sometimes,
not always.
Like boxing.
Not always with college football, though,
style.
Booger. That's my point. With college football, that's the lone exception, which is why I've complained about college football for years. Like, for example, when they came out with 4 teams, I lost it. I went apoplectic over the air because I was like, why isn't it 8 teams? Why would you stop at 4? You got Power 5 conferences. And I literally said years ago, what if one of the teams goes undefeated in one of the Power 5 conferences and they get left out? I literally said that. And everybody was like, that's not going to happen.
Right. Listen, I truly get that. Here's what I'm going to ask you, though, Stephen A.
Okay.
If you were in the room and they say, Stephen A., who are you putting in? Who are you going to be your 4 teams? Give me your 4 teams and why.
It would have been the 4 teams that are in there. Honestly. It would have been fun. I'm not leaving because I think that the SEC conference is so superior. You can't tell me that Georgia and Alabama ain't one of the top 4 teams in the nation. And so because...
So why are we playing then? Because you can make that same argument back in August. So why are we playing the games then? Because I can tell you right now,
okay.
9 months from now, I can tell you Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and probably 2 other teams are going to be 4 to 5 best. So why play the game?
Well, listen.
Why?
Well, here's why you play the game. Number one, because mistakes happen. Number two, because let's say, for example, hypothetically, there was no SEC championship game, and Georgia and Alabama had just played in a regular season game, and Georgia lost that game. Guess what? You still pick Georgia because Georgia was 29-0 over the last 2.5 years, and the 2-time reigning defending national champions. The problem with Georgia was that Georgia was neither. I mean, you didn't win your conference. You didn't win, your conference championship. So you don't have an undefeated record, and you're not the SEC champion. I couldn't put you in there, but I can't leave the SEC out when that's the #1 conference. I'm looking at 2 teams that can make an argument that they're the best in the nation. I got to pick at least one of them.
I hear you. This year, and this is coming from somebody who played in the SEC and has covered it, the SEC was down this year. As a matter of fact, the ACC, which got left out, was ahead from the standpoint they beat the SEC, I want to say 6-4 in head-to-head games.
I believe so.
And so I can make an argument that the ACC was stronger this year. So traditionally, you're right. The SEC has been dominant for a long time, not this season. And I think when you factor in all those things, like we can go round and round, but when you factor in all those things, I just feel like a Power 5 institution, Florida State, we're not talking about just any institution. Florida State got chips on the wall.
Right.
If you go all the way back to Bobby Bowden, like Florida State is notable. This is not
true.
UCF or somebody like Florida State.
Jimbo Fisher brought a national title there.
No question with Jameis Winston. So to leave them out based on style points, based on what 13 people would feel would happen in the room was just wrong. And I felt like yesterday on the show I needed to voice that because they didn't have a voice on there, number one. And number two, it doesn't matter if it was Florida State. Take the school out. It could have been Winston-Salem State. It could have been South Carolina. It doesn't matter. If you earn something on the playing field, basketball, football, whatever, and somebody, in my opinion, wrongly takes it away from you, the voiceless need a voice.
2 questions.
And I was definitely going to be that.
2 questions before I let you get on out of here. Number one, if TCU hadn't gotten stomped 65-7 in last year's national championship game, do you think this happens to Florida State this year?
Probably not. I don't know that for sure, but probably not.
Question number 2, and I threw this out there. You might not ever speak to me again once I say this to you, Booger. I was on national television this morning. You know what I said?
What's that?
Yo, man, if primetime Deion Sanders was the coach at Florida State, which is where he wanted to go, which is where he starred as a player, and they were undefeated with him as the coach, I think they would have went in. I think they would have went in. Now, Norvell has done a phenomenal job. He has proven to be a sensational coach. No shade thrown on him whatsoever. But style points in the sport of college football has religiously mattered over the years. And I think that if primetime Deion Sanders was the coach at that university, it would have happened. What are your thoughts about that?
I may agree with you because if you look at what they did, who's the coach of Alabama? Only the GOAT, Nick Saban.
That's right.
And to your point, Nick Saban carries some cash. I guarantee you those people in the room are saying, man, can we leave Saban out?
For the second straight year.
Alabama out? And so even though Deion doesn't have the chips on the wall that Nick Saban does, he does have that same cachet from the standpoint of style points and entertainment. So, yeah, I can go along with that.
You gonna be all right, man? I mean, I'm just here because this is your brother. I'm just checking on you. Are you gonna be all right? That Florida State's going through what they're going through. Are you gonna be all right? Because we got a college football playoffs coming up in a few weeks. You gonna be okay when you got to critique those games?
Stephen A., hey, I'm gonna be all right. If you can lose 20 pounds and get a 6-pack, I'm gonna be all right with this college football playoff.
Oh, I ain't got the 6-pack yet, but I have lost 35 pounds. I have lost 35 pounds, but I'm still trying to get the 6-pack. I'm still trying to get the 6-pack. You know what I'm saying? I got that loose skin. I got to work out too. You know what I'm saying? I got to work it out.
Seriously though, man. By the way, listen, it's one of the things that all men, especially black men, as we get older, man, we need to be in better shape and not just sit around and collect guts because we want to eat a lot. So I'm proud of you for doing that, man. I noticed you've been talking about it. I saw you unveil your jacket and shirt nice and European cut. I like that.
I'm trying. And by the way, as much as I love you, stop lying. I can't let you get away with lying to the American public. You know good and damn well you don't wear no Sears suits. Okay, you know better than that. You know good and damn well you got some Tom Ford or some other stuff going on. Ain't no damn suit from Sears. Stop that.
Listen,
stop that.
I'm trying to draw an analogy. You got to paint a picture vividly for people when they're listening.
I love you, bro. Appreciate you, my man. Thanks so much.
Always, anytime. Steve.
Take care, buddy. All right. The one and only Booger McFarland right here, joining yours truly right here on the Stephen A. Smith Show.